At 44 years old, I learned that my own parents had stopped setting a plate for me at Christmas dinner 3 years before I even noticed. But what I discovered 3 days later changed everything. My name is Margaret Ellison, though most people who love me call me Maggie. And for 22 years, I taught third grade at Willow Creek Elementary in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, where the maple trees turn the color of fire every October, and everyone knows everyone's business, whether they want to or not. I was married to a good man named Walter for 18 years before a heart attack took him from me on a Tuesday morning while he was tying his work boots by the back door. I remember the sound the boot made when it hit the floor. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should pick it up before someone tripped. Grief does strange things to a person's mind. It makes you tidy at the worst possible moments. Walter and I never had children of our own. But I had a family before him, my parents, Harold and Doris Whitfield, and my younger brother Craig, who had 2 kids of his own by the time he turned 30. I loved my parents the way you love people who raised you with more discipline than warmth. My father worked 31 years at the same machine parts factory. My mother clipped coupons and reused tinfoil and told me, more times than I could count, that money doesn't grow on trees and neither does love, so you'd better earn both. I earned both, or I thought I did. When Walter died, I used what was left of his life insurance, combined with money I'd saved from decades of careful teaching salaries and weekend tutoring, to buy a piece of land on the edge of town, 11 acres that used to belong to an old dairy farm, and I built a house on it. Not a mansion, not at first. But over the years, as I paid down the mortgage faster than anyone expected, as I added a sunroom, then a wraparound porch, then converted the old hay barn into a workshop I rented out to a woodworker. The house grew into something people in town started calling the Ellison place, the way you'd refer to a small, local landmark. 8 bedrooms by the time I was done, a pond stocked with bass, a kitchen with windows that caught the morning sun in a way that made even a Tuesday feel like a holiday. I want to be honest with you. I did not build that house to impress anyone. I built it because, after Walter died, I needed something to pour myself into that wouldn't leave me the way people do. Houses stay where you put them. My parents came to see it once, the year it was finished. My mother walked through every room with her arms crossed, touching nothing, and at the end she said, "Well, aren't you the lucky one?" Not proud, not warm. Lucky, like I'd won a scratch-off ticket instead of built something with my own 2 hands and half my heart. That was the first Christmas I wasn't invited to their house. My mother called and said it would just be immediate family this year, meaning Craig, his wife Denise, and their 2 children, Tyler and Brooke. I told myself it was fine. I told myself grief makes people want smaller gatherings, and maybe my being newly widowed made the house feel heavier with sadness than they could carry during the holidays. So I spent that Christmas alone with a small turkey breast and a Hallmark movie, and I told myself it was fine. The second year, I wasn't invited either, and this time I noticed that Craig's family had posted photos online, my parents' living room, the tree, the whole spread, 3 days before Christmas even happened. Rehearsal dinner photos, almost. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold, scrolling through pictures of a life I used to be part of, feeling like a guest who'd been quietly uninvited from her own family history. The third year, my mother didn't even call to explain. She simply didn't call at all. I want you to understand something about me before I go further. I am not a woman who screams. I did not grow up in a house where screaming solved anything. It only got you sent to your room. And eventually you learn that silence is safer. And eventually, if you're not careful, silence becomes a personality. For years, I mistook my calm for weakness. I've since learned it's the opposite, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That third Christmas Eve, my phone rang. It was my father, and for one small, foolish second, my heart lifted. Maybe this was the call. Maybe this was the year they remembered. Instead, he said, "Maggie, I need to talk to you about the house." Not, "Merry Christmas." Not, "How are you holding up since Walter?" The house. "What about it?" I said. "Your mother and I have been talking to Craig," he said in the careful voice he used when he'd already decided something and was only informing me as a courtesy. "You've got all that space out there, and you're rattling around in it alone. Craig thinks, we all think, it might make sense for the family to be closer together. Denise's parents are getting older, and with the kids growing, they could really use more room. I sat very still in my kitchen, in the house I built with Walter's memory and my own 2 hands, and I said, "Are you asking me to give my house to Craig?" Nobody said give. My father said, sounding wounded that I'd used such an ugly word. "We're saying share. Family helps family." I told him I needed to think about it, and I hung up the phone, and I sat at that table until the candle in the window had burned down to nothing, watching the snow fall over the pond Walter and I used to skate on before he got sick. I did not scream. I did not cry, not that night. I made a pot of tea, and I thought about my mother's voice saying, "Aren't you the lucky one?" And I understood, maybe for the first time, that in my family's eyes, my success wasn't something I'd earned. It was a resource, something to be redistributed once it grew large enough to be useful to someone else. 2 weeks later, my brother Craig called, and this time there was no pretense of a question. "Denise found a house listing for us near you," he said, cheerful as anything, as if we'd been planning this together for months. "But honestly, Maggie, it doesn't make sense for us to buy something new when you've got 8 bedrooms out there and it's just you." Mom and Dad agree. We were actually thinking Denise's parents could take the east wing, and we'd take the rest, and you could keep your room, of course. You'd have people around again. Isn't that what you want? What I wanted, I did not say, was for someone in my family to ask how I was doing since my husband died. What I wanted was for someone to remember that grief doesn't come with an eviction notice attached. But I only said, "Let me think about it, Craig," in a voice so calm it surprised even me. That night I got a text. It wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Denise, but Craig, careless the way people get when they think they're untouchable, sent it to our family group thread by mistake. It read, "Once she signs it over, we can finally get Mom and Dad into assisted living without paying for it ourselves. She's been alone so long she'll probably be grateful for the company. Delete this after you read it, LOL." I read that message 4 times before I understood what I was looking at. My brother and his wife had already mapped out a future in which my house, Walter's and my house, became the family's free retirement plan, and I would be grateful for the privilege of losing it. I did not respond to the group thread. I did not call Craig screaming, though God knows I wanted to. Instead, I sat with that message glowing on my phone screen in my dark kitchen, and for the first time in 3 years, something in me went very quiet and very clear, the way a pond goes still right before the first hard frost. I want to tell you something about myself that my family had conveniently forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to learn. Before I ever met Walter, before Willow Creek Elementary, I spent 6 years working as a paralegal to put myself through my teaching degree at night. I understood contracts. I understood deeds. And more importantly, I had a friend from those years, a woman named Pamela Reyes, who is now one of the most respected estate attorneys in the county. The morning after I read that text, I called Pamela and asked her to meet me for coffee. I told her everything, Walter, the house, the missed Christmases, the message meant for Denise. Pamela listened the way good lawyers do, without interrupting, taking small notes on a legal pad. And when I finished, she said, "Maggie, do you understand that not one person in your family currently has any legal claim to that property? It's in your name and yours alone. Walter's insurance paid it off years ago. There's no mortgage for anyone to inherit, no lien, nothing." "I know," I said. "That's not what worries me." "Then what worries you?" "That they think it's already theirs," I said, "and that I let them think it because I was too tired and too sad to correct them." Pamela set down her pen. "Then I think it's time we made something very clear on paper in a way nobody in your family can misread by accident or on purpose." Over the following weeks, quietly, without telling a soul, Pamela helped me set up an irrevocable trust. The house, the 11 acres, the pond, the workshop, all of it went into that trust, with myself as the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. But here's the part that mattered most. I named specific, permanent conditions for what happened after me, And none of those conditions involved handing my life's work to a brother who saw me as a retirement plan or parents who saw me as lucky instead of loved. I also, at Pamela's gentle suggestion, had a full property appraisal done. The house was worth considerably more than my family assumed. Enough that whatever plans Craig and Denise had been quietly whispering about were built on a number they'd invented in their heads, not the one on paper. I told no one, not my father, not Craig, not even my closest neighbor. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than sadness rattling around in that big house. I felt ready. Spring came, and with it came my mother's annual attempt at normalcy. A phone call inviting me to Easter, breezy and warm as though the last 3 Christmases hadn't happened, as though I hadn't noticed a single thing. I said yes. I wanted to see their faces when they realized I'd noticed everything. Easter Sunday, I drove to my parents' house with a coconut cake, the kind my mother used to make when I was small, and I walked in wearing a soft blue dress and my calmest smile. Craig was already there with Denise and the kids, and Denise, I noticed, couldn't quite meet my eyes over the deviled eggs. We made it through the meal on pleasant enough small talk. The weather, Tyler's soccer season, Brooke's braces, until my father, emboldened by a second glass of wine, set down his fork and said, "Maggie, now that you're here, we should really talk details about the house situation. Craig's got a realtor lined up to look at his current place, get it appraised for sale, so we can figure out timing." The table went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone already knows something is about to happen and only one person in the room doesn't yet realize she's the one about to cause it. I set down my own fork, folded my hands, and I looked at each of their faces. My father's hopeful and entitled, my mother's expectant, Craig's a little smug, Denise's still refusing to meet my eyes. "There is no house situation," I said, my voice even and clear. "There hasn't been one for months." "What do you mean?" my father said, frowning. "I mean the house isn't available to anyone but me," I said. "Not now. Not after I'm gone. I put it into a trust in January with permanent conditions. Nobody in this family can sell it, move into it, or inherit it the way you've apparently been planning at my kitchen table without me." Craig's face went through 3 colors in rapid succession. "Maggie, we were just talking. We never said. You texted your wife that once I signed it over, you could put Mom and Dad in assisted living without paying for it yourselves," I said, still calm, still not raising my voice. "You sent it to the family group thread by mistake in December. I've had it for 4 months." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. My mother's face crumpled, not with shame, I noticed, but with the particular panic of someone watching a plan die in real time. "Maggie, that's not—" Craig didn't mean it like that. He was just thinking out loud. "Families do that." "Families ask," I said. "Families don't calculate. There's a difference, Mom." And I spent 3 Christmases alone learning it. My father tried a different approach, leaning forward with the stern voice he'd used on me as a child. "Now, Margaret, don't be dramatic. Nobody was trying to hurt you. We're your family. That house should stay in the family." "I am the family," I said quietly. "I've been the family this whole time. I just wasn't invited to sit at the table for it." I stood up, straightened my blue dress, and I looked at my mother one last time. "I loved you my whole life, hoping you'd notice me the way you noticed Craig. I'm 44 years old, and I finally understand that love you have to keep earning isn't love. It's rent, and I'm done paying it." I left the coconut cake on the table. I did not slam the door on my way out. In the weeks that followed, the fallout arrived exactly the way Pamela had warned me it might. Craig called 4 times, alternating between apology and accusation, at one point suggesting I'd always been the difficult one, which I found almost funny, coming from the man who'd tried to plan my life around his mortgage. Denise sent one message, brief and clipped, asking if I intended to keep them from the kids, to which I replied that Tyler and Brooke were always welcome in my home on my terms as my niece and nephew, not as future real estate. My parents did not call for 2 months. When my father finally did, it wasn't an apology. It was a request for a loan, framed, of course, as a family obligation. I said no gently, and for once in my life, I did not feel guilty saying it. I want to tell you that the story ends there with a slammed door and a moral lesson, but life is rarely that tidy. What actually happened was quieter, and in its own way more satisfying. 6 months after that Easter dinner, Pamela called to tell me that Craig, in a fit of financial overreach fueled by assumptions about an inheritance that no longer existed, had already put a deposit on a house he could not truly afford, banking on money that was never coming. When the truth caught up with him, the deal fell through, and with it went a good deal of the confidence he'd carried into every family gathering for years. I felt no satisfaction in his stumble. I want to be honest about that too. I only felt the quiet, sad recognition that some people build their whole lives on assumptions about what other people owe them. My mother reached out the following spring, nearly a year after that Easter, in a letter, an actual handwritten letter, the first honest thing she'd sent me in years. She wrote that she and my father had done some hard thinking, that they understood now what those missed Christmases had cost, that they'd mistaken my quietness for endless patience instead of what it actually was, a woman who had simply run out of things to prove. I invited them to my house that Christmas, the fourth one on my terms, at my table in the home I built with my own hands and my late husband's memory. My mother cried when she walked in, not because the house was bigger than she remembered, but because, she told me later, she finally understood I hadn't built it to show off. I'd built it because I needed somewhere safe to stand after I lost the person who made me feel like I belonged anywhere at all. Craig didn't come that first year back. He needed longer. I let him take it. Healing, I've learned, isn't something you can hand someone on a schedule, the way you can't force a pond to freeze before the cold is ready. These days, my house is full again, but differently than before. Tyler and Brooke spend part of their summers with me, and I've taught them both to fish off the dock the way Walter taught me. My mother calls every Sunday now, not to ask about the house, but to ask about me, which took her 68 years and one very painful Easter to learn how to do. My father has never quite found the words for a real apology, but he shows up now every Christmas and sits at the far end of my table, and that from him is its own kind of sorry. I think about that Christmas Eve phone call sometimes, the one where my father first asked me to give my house away, dressed up as a family favor. I think about how close I came to saying yes, simply because I was tired of being alone and mistook being useful for being loved. I'm grateful now for that misdirected text message, ugly as it was to read. It woke me up before I signed away the only thing I'd built entirely for myself. I didn't build the biggest house in town to prove anything to my parents. I built it because after losing Walter, I needed to prove something to myself, that I could still create a life worth living. Brick by brick, even when the people who were supposed to hold me up had already started measuring the square footage for themselves. Quiet people don't explode. They clarify. And once you've clarified who you are and what you're worth, nobody gets to redraw those lines again. Not out of love, and certainly not out of convenience.